Webinar Week. I'm sitting here with my direct colleague Alessandra Antonacci from EADTU and Ingrid Thaler from Fijn Universiteit and Claire Dun. And they are going to present the second two presentations of the Short Learning Programs Webinar Week. Alessandra, would you like to say something about it?
Yeah. So welcome everybody. I see many names that were here yesterday too. For the one that are new, sorry if you hear some repetition. Actually, for the one new, I'm going to repeat again. Sorry for the one who were here yesterday. So as you might have seen in the program, this event is like sponsor and aim to share the result of our E-SLP project, so the European Short Learning Program, where I am the project coordinator and with the European Association of Distant Teaching University, that we pronounce EATU. So if you hear EATU, is that, or EADTU, is the same thing. So today is our second day. We did on our website, I'm going to share it soon. On our website, you can find the record and all the presentations that were done yesterday. And we will post the one that will be done today. So the speaker you see, and the board introduced them already, Ingrid from Universiteit, Germany, and Claire Dun from the Open University, UK. They have a similar topic, so all the topic of our project are connected, of course. So Ingrid will give a presentation on the implementation of European Short Learning Programs and recommendation for our stakeholders, and she will explain who these stakeholders are. And Claire instead will focus more on a recognition of short learning program, and will touch a topic like a very, very on wave nowadays, like a micro-credential. So I leave the floor to Bo, that is in charge of the event organization, and enjoy.
Yes, thank you very much, Alessandra. So as you know, we already started with this webinar week yesterday with presentations by Tom Malai and Sandrine Albert. And today we have the presentation. We start with Ingrid Thaler about implementing European SLPs, recommendations from stakeholders. And then we move on to Claire Dun, who is going to talk about challenges and opportunities for the recognition of short learning programs within the European higher education area, which already sounds very interesting. And I would like to hear the presentations as well. Don't forget, tomorrow we also have the last day of our webinar week with presentations by valedictorian and by a group of people who are going to present about lessons learned from the pilot digital competent educator. These will be presented by 6 presenters, so this must be very interesting. I can't wait for that as well. And for now, I would like to give the floor to Ingrid Thaler, who is going to speak first. So thank you. Welcome, Ingrid.
Hello, welcome everybody, and thank you to Bo and to Alessandra for the lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here and to be presenting here. So my first question would be now, how are you all doing these days? I feel like we're all a bit exhausted at the moment. Now this is right after lunch, so I want to share with you that I feel the same way, and I'm sure we'll make a really fruitful discussion here in these days. So are you doing okay? Is everybody fine? Can I get something in the chat? Okay. You are all okay. Thank you. Yeah, our numbers are rising in Germany at the moment, so it's a little strange at the moment. So, and I feel like it's impacting all of us now. It's getting sort of going to our heads a little bit. Everyone's nervous at the moment. So that's all I wanted to mention before we go into detail. So this is the second day of our webinar. What I'm presenting is sort of like the result of our reflections of our own practice in the project. So yesterday we heard from Tom the definition of short learning program, how it's related to micro-credentials. what it actually means. So it's a short learning unit of 5 to 30 ECTS that is accredited, hopefully, and that people get some certificate for. That's where we want to go. But to get an idea of what we are actually doing at the moment in Europe, we did 2 surveys in our work package to get an idea of what kind of shared learning programs exist, what is the strategic positioning, and what conclusions can we draw from our own work to further advance the implementation of shared learning programs. So what you will see in a minute is the result of our internal discussions, what needs to happen in order to make shared learning programs part of our Bologna cycle. So I thought I'd start out by remembering our attendees, who we are. We are a project that consists of 13 partners, and even though I don't want to go into detail who we all are in particular, we are 10 distance education universities and 3 on-campus universities. So our focus in the project, I would think, is primarily universities who are focused on lifelong learning and who are focused on non-traditional students. So for us, this is the perspective we bring to the discussion around micro-credentials and short learning programs. So now I'd like to ask Bo to do the survey that I wanted to ask. I want to hear from you, who you are. So are you from a distance education university, like most of us all here in the project are? Are you from an on-campus university, interested in lifelong learning, interested in new formats? Or are you someone working in policy making on the European level? Or are you someone working in policy making in your respective country?
Yes, thank you very much, Ingrid. I see some people voting in here. It's multiple choice, so if you are from more than one institution, it can be as well. But if you are not one of those 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 first options, please write to in the chat if you want something else and just interested in here. Let me know. I see some people still voting. 52% at the moment. 61%.
Mm-hmm.
See also some people typing in the chat. Curious. 70%.
Oh, distance education organization for refugees. Is this Kieran? Okay. Hello, Andrew. Nice to have you with us.
Okay, I will end the voting and then we can share the results. Ingrid, can you see the results?
So not properly. So 70%.
Or you can scroll down.
Yeah, I can see that. So.
And then you can see what the audience has voted.
So most of us are from a distance education university, and there's almost 25 from on campus, and no policy stakeholders. Okay, that's good to know. So we're all people who are doing the actual work, discussing here how we can advance our Bologna cycle and our degree programs into other formats, maybe. So I would assume this is why you're here, to hear of new formats and how they can be positioned in Europe. Yeah. So I'm going to
the presentation.
Yeah, can we go back to the presentation? So thank you for your feedback.
Of course. Yes.
Thank you, Bo. So I'm going to start with the recommendations. If anything is unclear while I'm talking, please feel free to write comments in the chat. At the moment, I can read all the comments and I'll try to address them while I give the presentation, and I'm happy to also talk to you afterward, but don't hesitate to ask questions if anything is unclear while I'm talking. So we defined so-called fields of action. It's a little small here on the screen. So there is 2 levels that we defined. The one is the policy level, the other one is the institutional level, and of course they complement each other and they try to work together. But in a sense, there is this one sense where we have policy making that then goes into the institution, and on the other hand, there's many diverse practices going on in Europe. And one of our main results was this: despite the Bologna cycle, and despite the Bologna process, our practices are very diverse all over Europe. And so are the practices of shared learning programs. Which is why we decided to focus on two levels: the European and national policy level, where we make recommendations on that level, and then for institutions, what they can do to further advance shared learning programs. So, and why did we place European and national levels together? Because we think we need to find common ground. Often, we all make the experience that the national level is very different from European policy. And our suggestion is that we start to think those levels together right from the start, and then we have more communication between these levels. And as I said, the institutional level that as we found out in our project is very diverse, and it reflects the diversity of the European higher education system. It starts with funding, it starts with accreditation and quality assurance. Even the length of our degree programs differs all over Europe. So it's hard to find common ground. It's hard to find a shared new format. But I think we need to do that and need to get there. So, European and national policy level. First, I think we need to find a joint definition. So far, the market is very broad, even with micro-credentials. We have shared learning programs. Many institutions offer shared learning programs. In our consortium, we have many shared learning program offerings, albeit they're very different in size, in accreditation, and if you get a certificate or not. So we suggest that we need a streamlining and focus on academic competences, small-sized learning units, 5 to 30 ECTS, as Tom explained yesterday. And this format then needs to be branded as a European format and integrated into the Bologna cycle. So we argue that success depends on the visibility, on the clear format, but also on sufficient recognition. I cannot move to the next slide. So the second other aspect is not only do we need to think policy levels together, but also we found out that shared learning programs have two different foci. On one hand, there's the national level. Many of our partners offer shared learning programs on a national level in their native language, in their country's language, sometimes for very specific target groups, for stakeholders such as municipalities or governments. And then we also have, albeit on a smaller scale, joint offerings in English, something we've also done in our project. You will hear later tomorrow one of these great collaborative projects. So these are the two levels on which shared learning programs can be formed. That's one argument, and also can be combined. And this goes with input from what we, from the demand we get from the market and from the national institutional stakeholders. So in the project, 92% of our shared learning programs are offered at national level, so that there's a clear focus at the moment. And I think this needs to be taken to a European level. The same goes for the idea of lifelong learning. Shared learning programs are offered on all levels, on bachelor, master, and PhD level, as Tom explained yesterday. So they are definitely an aspect of academic education, of academic competencies. At the same time, they're not open. So you need to have at least a university entrance qualification. So this is the distinction to open education. At the same time, we go through the same issues that are currently debated around micro-credentials. There are no set or established quality assurance practices. The current practices we have all across Europe are too extensive. So we argue we need a fast-paced European quality assurance system level means, and there's the EADTU Excellence label. That would be one way to develop this further so that we can design SLPs within a year. So as you heard probably yesterday, that SLPs mostly often respond to new topics and need to be developed quickly. And this doesn't really correspond with the planning of a whole degree program in most countries. So field of action number 3 is funding. As you all probably know, our funding models are so different all across Europe that's even there hard to find common ground. So there needs to be discussion about what we want with these short learning programs. I, as a German higher education person, I'm strongly in favor of making education accessible to everyone. So I think if we design short learning programs, they need to be affordable to the people who actually need it. So there needs to be a discussion on how we fund this and how we charge it. We also argue that we need a funding scheme for short learning programs to be able to gain ground. So we suggest to the Commission that there needs to be a funding program based on the idea of lifelong learning for SLP development and implementation. I'm sorry. Visibility and incentive. So I was here, sorry, moving on. So everything clear so far before I rush through here? Can I get something in the chat from our participants? So yes, everything is clear. Yes, thank you. All good? Okay. So field of action 4 is visibility and incentives. Well, the project has created the E-SLP platform. So that's kind of the first repository to further promote short learning programs. We think it needs more visibility, and it needs to be increased and have like a central platform. So the project is trying to achieve that, but it needs, of course, to be spread wider and be marketed wider. So we're working on that. The second thing is in visibility and incentives, to create more incentives that SLPs are mission-based as incubators for innovation. So what we found in the projects that there is no real focus in terms of academic fields where short learning programs are offered. They are offered across all academic fields, from technological innovations, from the so-called future skills, global skills, digital skills, the classic thing that we're all talking about, artificial intelligence, learning analytics, but also to teacher training and local leadership professions, and also in the humanities. So it's a very broad field. And we need to create incentives to base this more on a mission-based idea of what we want to offer. As I mentioned earlier, most of us are in the area of lifelong learning. So the focus of shared learning programs will probably be for people who work across all life stages. But we also sometimes have in some countries very young students enrolling for short learning programs right after they graduate from high school. But I would think that the tendency is moving towards a longer idea of learning in everyone's lives, and having short learning programs is something that complements your learning experience throughout your life. Okay, this was the first part. This is what we recommended to national and policy stakeholders, none of whom are here at the moment, which is something I regret. If there is someone coming in later who is a stakeholder, I'd be happy to hear from you on what you think about what we just suggested and how you experience short learning programs and the whole discussion around micro-credentials. But for now, I will move on to recommendations for higher education institutions. And again, fields of actions are only two at this point. The one is institutional profile, and the other one is design and implementation. So reconcile European initiatives with your institution's learners. So we would argue that by bringing together national and European interests, we combine these interests and bring European-induced contents to local and regional learners. Earlier on, I suggested that there's two kinds of shared learning programs, ones that are nationally focused in our country's respective languages, and others that are collaborative in English and are offered by more than one institution. So we could also think about offering something that is developed on a higher level, European level, but then also that there's aspects that are offered nationally in the language and are translated, and so there's many forms. So we think that we need, in these times, we need to think national and European interests together. We also think that to be successful, lifelong learning needs to be part of your institution's mission. And we would also suggest that for the funding program, that lifelong learning is the central aspect to get funding. And by doing that, we hope that lifelong learning also gains more prominence in our institutional work at higher education institutions. So it's the mission, but it's also working together on a European level to link European and national interests. So designing and implementing short learning programs. Again, we need to agree on a format. We suggest one. We suggest that it's stackable, maybe integrated into a degree program. That would be perfect. And we need to identify institutional stakeholders. In our survey, stakeholders vary considerably in what our higher education institutions are aiming at and who they work with. So it's very broad. There's market analysis and research. And my sense is this comes mostly from universities who need tuition fees to fund themselves. So market research, market analysis and research is strong, but also working with students, satisfaction surveys. Then often if higher education institutions fulfill national missions, it's regional cooperation with cities, municipalities, or federal states. It's partnerships with local and civil society. It's business partners, training agencies, and employees' representative associations. These are all our partners that our project consortium works with. So we rely on the identification of stakeholders to make it successful. And the last point I want to make for this aspect is, and this is a big discussion, I think it's interesting to hear from you later on. Of course, short learning programs and micro-credentials, they play into what we call in Germany continuing education. I know there's countries like Finland, my colleagues from Finland tell me continuing education is not a field universities or higher education is active in. In other countries, higher education institutions design specific programs that are called continuing education, but they are not part of their regular degree programs. So we think that this is part of the idea of developing further what we call continuing education in context with lifelong learning. And the other question then is, how do we develop further? How do we go beyond our traditional degree programs in what we call continuing education with shorter formats? And how do we position this in our institutions, and how do we finance it? So we suggest in the consortium to develop a dedicated extension scheme for continuing education, which serves as an incubator for innovation, which can develop new programs quickly, which doesn't go through the whole accreditation process. As I said, I'm German. Accreditation is a nightmare to me. It's really hard for us to develop new degree programs because it takes so long. So this is like an idea that we suggest because it helps us to be faster in taking up the need for new skills, for new ideas. At the same time, we have partners who develop continuing education in so-called spin-off. I call it spin-off scenarios. So the new programs are developed not at the university, but at a separate unit that needs to be financed solely through fees. So sometimes these offerings are very expensive. So the consortium suggests not to move into the spin-off scenario, to separate these new offerings from our regular offerings, but to integrate them into the institution as part of their regular offerings. So short learning programs can be part of that movement and development to develop more flexible structures in our degree programs. Oh yeah, here somebody was writing that they also call it continuing education. Yeah. So it's a complicated field, but I think an interesting one. And if you look at the market right now, a lot is happening also from private providers. And how are we going to react as higher education institutions beyond going on the platform and participating? Do we want other initiatives as well? How do we want to position short learning programs in that whole big context that also, in my perspective, revolves around how we finance higher education, how we want to finance education in Europe in the future? So this is definitely a move that suggests that Europe needs affordable education with measured tuition fees. And this is what in the consortium we discussed. So conclusion is, as you might have noticed, our suggestions are way more extensive on policy level, which is an indication of that there's lots of work to be done on the policy level, on the formal level, for higher education institutions to be able to develop short learning programs. It has to be part of their portfolio, which it isn't very often, or only separate, or only with high fees, but not part of an larger innovation process that higher education institutions need, I think. The future perspective we have in our project is that as partners in this consortium, we like to continue working together, develop more projects together, and also try to merge this European and national interest idea we have. And also maybe also invite on-campus universities, work with them and collaborate more on European level on this aspect. So I'm taking a short breath right now. I'm coming to my conclusion. This is basically a summary of what I just said. So short learning programs need to focus on academic competences. They need a clear definition. They need to be integrated into the Bologna structures as vital European offerings. They need to be developed between or with European and national higher education foci. They need input from stakeholders, regional, but also institutional and international. They help to maintain learners' interest in higher education across all age and education levels, as long as the requirements of entry are fulfilled. They should be integrated into fast-paced quality assurance mechanisms. Short learning programs also challenge existing business models within higher education. And of course, because we are so diverse, if we want to find common ground, we have to question how we find that common ground in our circumstances right now. And short learning programs need additional targeted funding schemes to move forward. Short learning programs need to become more visible for a central, international, and open repository. They need a place on the web. They demand recognition as incubators for innovation, which is what I think they are and can be. They might be able to adapt European-induced content for local, national, and regional context. They can help to shape lifelong learning missions of higher education institutions and bring lifelong learning into Bologna and into all our lives. They should be stackable short offerings, as we suggest, covering 5 to 30 ECTS. Shared learning programs rely on the identification of stakeholders through different means, various means. And we have to open up the discussion of what is continuing education and how can we integrate continuing education units into our institution to innovate existing programs. Okay, so that was it from my side. Thank you very much for listening. Again, please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions. I'm also going to promote our very best product right now that we're active in. It's called Digitally Competent Educators, that will be presented tomorrow. So that's like a practice where you can see what a shared learning program can be and how significant it is. I'm open to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, for your presentation. Is it possible to share your email address in the chat as well?
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Alessandra
Thank you,
did.
Alessandra.
Perfect. So to the audience, do you have any questions for Ingrid on her presentation regarding short learning programs? Please feel free to write so in the chat.
Do you relate to short learning programs in your institution?
That's a nice question. So do you relate to short learning programs in your own institution?
We're all from higher education institutions, as we heard. So how is it in your institution?
See someone typing.
Alessandra, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience. You're going through a lot of European meetings, and you have this policy perspective in the that you bring to this project with the EIDTU. Maybe can you comment on what I just presented, or do you agree? I mean, you're part of the project. You cannot that much disagree, but we can have a discussion. I'm happy to hear your
I wanted
input.
to give some minutes to participants to take part in this. So you see someone, right? So UK has not accredited learning blocks, and the industry lead related courses none have credit or recognition attached though. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, was a very long presentation. Thank you for that. What I am recalling is like you mentioned, for instance, that need to be embedded in the Bologna process, and E-SLP use the Bologna tools such as the credit or anything that can help with the recognition, let's say. So we refer also to this sort of a diploma supplement that, because will help other institutions to figure out what language we are talking. But I think this will be touched more by Claire in the next presentation. And also for the online of making E-SLP more visible will be developed. Actually, is being developed the SLP portal, so that is called SLP for You. I don't share yet the link because the portal is not ready, so it's online, but it's not full with our correct and punctual content, but will be released by the end of the year. And that is part also of the sustainability of this project. And many recommendations on policy, governmental on policies or governmental and institutional level will be released soon because we're part of another work package. But that will be soon available, I suppose, and we will share it. But I would like to give this space not to me, but to the other, and understand from them what they grasp from this presentation. Because for me, we know the content, so
Yeah.
let's see. Really, and
Okay,
if you want to comment something, we can make you presenter, and you don't have to turn on the camera. We just allow you to talk if you want to, instead of dubbing, if that is more feasible for you.
So I just read the comment from the Open University that you do have these learning blocks, but they have no credit or recognition. That's what many partners in our project have reported, and the Open University is a partner. Claire will present in a minute. That it's often not integrated into a larger structure and very separate from our degree programs, for example. And of course, it's a big question, recognition of prior learning. How do we integrate smaller learning units into larger structures? All these issues do come up with when you think about what a shared learning program could be and how it could be a productive means in our education systems. So thank you, Joanne, for bringing that to us.
Yes, thank you very much. I see another question popping up, a long one. How can non-university organizations work together with accredited institutions to experiment with various forms of short programs? And the second question as well.
Andrew, you are the Kieran guy, am I right? Yes. Oh yeah, there's more. So you're suggesting, before we move on, you're suggesting that higher education institutions work with non NGOs or other institutions to develop something like that. Is that true? Is that correct? And that they function as incubators for higher education institutions. I think that's an excellent idea, and I would very much welcome that. Yes, we need that kind of stakeholder conversation. Absolutely.
Yes,
so, can I ask something, Andrew? If we said like Kieran is in Berlin, Fernuni is in Hagen, Germany, what would you suggest would be a first angle to start that kind of conversation? Where do you see, what field would you like, just right off your bat? No, we don't need to discuss this extensively. Just what comes to your mind when you think about it. Where would you start? We'll give Andrew some time to think about it. Bo, do you want to read Mehmet's comment?
Of course. Mehmet says, thank you for your presentation. I think you're highlighting some very important points for the not so far future of higher education. I personally agree with the need for focusing more on the Bologna framework, but I also wonder why it is still not happening after around 15 years. Do you think maybe we should derive or improve the Bologna framework, for example, to come up with new definitions of learner achievements to SLPs?
Definitely. It's a good question why we haven't moved further with Bologna, right? And it's the other thing. It's so formal. In Germany, Bologna is so formal. It killed the fun in education for some people. That's terrible. That's not what it was designed for. So maybe we could use SLPs to reinvent Bologna. I would agree with that. But I would also argue, Mehmet, that we need a framework, that we still need something like Bologna. But it's a long process, probably.
Yes. Thank you for answering that question, Ingrid. I see Andrew typed his point as well. Andrew says, I see the potential widely. Start by asking the question, what can we do as a testing ground that can inform universities? It's a way to experiment with the form of SLPs without the high stakes at the university. He would like to see more interaction.
Yes, I'd be happy to have that conversation. Yes. Maybe we can do that for us, Andrew, if you like, and start a conversation. Yeah. Yeah, and Microball is a project of the European University Association, and I think the Finnish Ministry and some quality assurance association is reviewing how micro-credentials can be included in the Bologna process. Thank you for mentioning it, Alessandra.
Yes, thank you very much. See still a question from Clara. The Bologna process new ministerial communique will include the notion of shorter courses recognized by micro-credentials.
Yeah, I heard that they're discussing it, but thank you for letting us know that they're actually planning to include it.
She also says Microball is an EU project coordinated by the Flemish Ministry indeed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My apologies. I heard about it from the European University Association, so I'm sorry. I misconstructed it.
It's fine. Thank you for answering those questions. So if you may have more questions, you can still write them in the chat, and Ingrid can answer them via the chat as well, or via email, of course. Her email address is in the chat as well if you scroll a little bit up. And then if there's no more question at this moment, then I would like to thank you, Ingrid, for your presentation. It's very interesting, and hope, we can go further with it and maybe develop a new framework for the Bologna process as well. And then I would like to give the floor to Claire.
So can I say thank you to everybody for listening? Thank you to EIDTU, and I hand over to Claire and Bo. Thank you. Take care, you all. Stay healthy, huh?
Thank you. You too, Ingrid. All right. Thank you, Ingrid, and welcome, Claire.
Hello.
The floor is yours. Please give your presentation. I'm interested in this as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Bo. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar this afternoon, which is going to focus on the challenges and opportunities for the recognition of short learning programmes within the European higher education area. My name's Claire Dunn, and I'm a Senior Manager for Recognition of Prior Learning at the Open University in the UK. So throughout this webinar, I have a few aims to get through. So I initially want to provide an introduction to the concept of recognition, for which I'll provide a definition. I then want to highlight the benefits of recognising short learning programmes, not only to learners, but also to institutions and to employers. I'm then going to present the approaches to recognition across the partners of the European Short Learning Programmes project that kind of will show the varied approaches that do exist, before discussing the challenges that we face, but also the opportunities that could arise from the recognition of SLPs. Following on from this, I'm going to explore the validation of non-formal and informal learning within the context of kind of the project, and then make recommendations for the recognition of SLPs, focusing specifically on curriculum design and the recognition of prior formal, non-formal and informal learning. So as a previous lecturer delivering higher education qualifications within a further education context, I personally have a real personal investment in the concept of recognition for two reasons. One, to ensure that fair recognition of learning takes place across the higher education sector, but also to bring parity to higher level learning irrespective of where it takes place. And hopefully by doing that, we can start to bridge the gap between formal, informal and non-formal learning. Okay, so to provide some clarity, I'm going to provide a definition for the concept of recognition. So in 2012, the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, defined recognition as a process for granting official status to learning outcomes and competencies which can lead to the acknowledgement of their value in society. And I think it's that word value that we really need to kind of pull on there. The idea that everyone's learning should be valued irrespective of where it has been gained. In practice, UNESCO state that this could mean that outside a single institution, the number of credits gained for compatible learning outcomes achieved in another context will replace the number of credits that are allocated for compatible learning at the awarding institution. As we know, since its launch in 1999, fair recognition has been central to the Bologna process, as it's one of its main objectives, as have been the operating principles of the Lisbon Recognition Convention. Fair recognition of SLPs must therefore be established to ensure that smaller chunks of learning can be both valued in society and recognised within formal degree programmes. Despite this need for fair recognition, however, there's only a minority of quality assurance agencies that overtly consider institutional practices to the recognition of prior learning and whether they align with such principles. One of the complexities that we face with the recognition of SLPs is the varied approaches to recognition that exist not only between partner countries but also between institutions within the same country. In accordance with Marr and Bravenborough in 2017, there are two forms of market currency that exist within higher education, within our modern kind of higher education world. The first is a financial investment made by governments or learners in qualifications which can meet the skills needs of the economy, but also provide the individual with their position within the labour market. The second of which is that of academic credit, either in the form of prior educational qualifications or HE credit awarded and recognised for the purpose of entry to and transfer between HE institutions. And within the context of this presentation, we're interested in the second form of currency there, that idea of academic credit that is of interest and relevant to the concept of recognition in order for learning to be recognised irrespective of where it has been achieved. By recognising prior learning of an individual, whether it was completed inside or outside of formal educational settings, provides a way for us to certify human capital and foster personal career development, which should be an aim within any qualification framework. Recognising prior learning can also facilitate learner mobility, which might be of vast importance now that we find ourselves in the midst of this global pandemic. But also it promotes the concept of lifelong learning, through which the recognition of SLPs could contribute to the European Commission reaching its target of having 25% of the population engaging in learning throughout their lives by 2025. If we recognise SLPs, there are a number of benefits, not only to learners, but also to institutions and employers. So over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to present what I feel are the key benefits to recognising short learning programmes. For learners, it can support their career progression by giving them an opportunity to study learning that is responsive to their own individual career needs. It could also give them a step into employability if the specific employer within the labour market does recognise SLPs. It could then facilitate progression to higher education through the stackability of SLPs within larger degree programmes. And the third benefit here, which I think is a moral duty that higher education institutions have, but it will also reduce the duplication of learning. If SLPs can be kind of recognised as building blocks within formal degree programmes. By doing that, we could enhance self-confidence and motivation of those learners. But if we don't do it, it could almost devalue the learning that an individual has already done. For the institution, it can make them more accessible, people might not want to engage in a large degree program, but actually doing a smaller chunk of learning at one time that could then fit into a larger degree program might be more desirable for them. Through this, it could then also increase recruitment and then kind of widen access to higher education. And if we do that, there could be the argument that we could also increase retention and completion rates. It could also enable the institution to be more responsive to the labour market. And as a kind of final benefit, but I think this is a real strong benefit, it could facilitate and promote partnerships between different institutions, but also between institutions and employers, and most importantly, with the local communities. Finally, if we look at employers, what are the benefits for employers if they recognise these short learning programmes? Well, it can enable them to recruit a more skilled workforce, particularly if they recognise these short learning programmes. And if they do recognise them and they recognise these bouts of learning that an individual has done, it might then enhance employee satisfaction and also generate greater employee retention. Another key benefit is that it could facilitate the generation of ideas through reflection. So if an individual employee is able to go out and engage in short learning programs that are recognised within the labour market, within that particular organisation, it could generate the facilitation of really good ideas through reflection of the learning that they've studied within the SLP. And also another benefit would be the engagement from an employer in the development of SLPs. Okay, what I'm now going to explore in the next section is the approaches to recognition that came about within Work Package 5 of the Short Learning Programmes project, which the Open University UK had responsibility for. So as part of this work package, we engaged in some data collection to establish what the approaches to recognition were within the partner institutions. As part of this data collection, we provided a short questionnaire to institutions to find out their approaches to recognition. This was then supported by some desktop research. The questions within the questionnaire, which you'll see over the next couple of slides, were progressive in order for us to understand recognition practices from within and between institutions, but also move into cross-border recognition, highlighting some potential complexities that arise when we try to recognise qualifications that cross borders. So the first question that was asked was, it wanted to explore kind of recognition of credits within the institution. So to look at the possibility of within an institution, credit earned from a module or study to be recognised within another course within that institution. Now, all partner institutions stated that it was possible to recognise and transfer credits within their institutions, but it was very clear that variations existed within how this was interpreted by different faculties. One partner specifically stated that SLPs could be stacked within their and towards their MBA, and another partner institution stated that there was already a system available to include SLPs within degree programs. The second question looked at a national level. So we then wanted to find out whether the institution has a policy or framework for recognising and accepting credit for modules earned at another institution, but within the same country. 11 partner institutions stated that it was possible to recognise and accept credit for modules earned within an institution in the same country, but there were some specific criteria with this. So one institution specifically stated that certificate programs were not transferable within associate and bachelor's programs. So there was some restrictions there and limitations. Another institution stated that there was criteria for some credits to be included in the optional studies curriculum. So again, a limited opportunity. Another institution stated that there were 2/3 match requirement between the prior learning and also the kind of learning that they were bringing it into. And another institution stated that it was only possible for qualifications that were regulated, that were accessible for a regulated profession. And that might make sense considering that a lot of regulated professions, particularly here in the UK is the case, they have very set curriculum. 3 partner institutions stated that they have no institutional policy for the recognition of credits from other institutions. The third question wanted to find out whether the institution had a policy framework for recognising and accepting credit from another institution within a different European country. So we wanted to look at the kind of whether there were any complexities in recognising learning across borders. So 11 partner institutions again stated that it was possible to recognise and accept credit from another institution, but again there were some specific criteria from some institutions. So again, the same criteria: certificate programs were not transferable into associate or bachelor's programs within one organisation, and learning outcomes of part-time studies was able to be recorded in one institution as long as it showed compliance with the relevant kind of Bologna process. The same 3 partner institutions stated again that there was no policy for recognising and accepting credit from an institution in another European country. The final question asked if there was a kind of policy framework related to the transfer of credits between institutions at a national level. 8 partner institutions stated that there was no framework relating to the transfer of credit between institutions. The remaining partners who stated that there was actually related that it stood within policy described in national law through the European credit transfer system or through the Lisbon Recognition Convention. So some key observations then from the kind of responses that we received from the kind of partner institutions within the project. In all countries, regardless of whether in the law or within national policy, the responsibility for making recognition decisions was delegated to the individual higher education institutions. Each institution was therefore autonomous in deciding what prior learning can be recognised. The recognition of SLPs will therefore be under the discretion of each institution and not necessarily governed by national policy. Therefore, there is this very key feeling that there is this devolved responsibility, irrespective of whether in some countries there is some national policy that exists. But we could actually see this devolved responsibility as a strength because it could facilitate the capacity for us to develop an agreement of mutual recognition between partner institutions. It does, however, the results of the approaches that we established from the partner institutions does raise some challenges, but then some opportunities for the recognition of SLPs. So as alluded to in previous slides, a key challenge to the recognition of short learning programs is the level of institutional autonomy that exists in the recognition of prior learning. In accordance with Shapiro 2017, the personal judgment factor plays an important role here, as does the notion of substantial difference that exists within the Lisbon Recognition Convention. It is therefore a matter of interpretation from within the institution. This becomes even more complicated when we start to work across borders, when despite having the support of recognition centres such as NARIC, which exists in many countries, including the UK, not all qualifications can be recognised. And although the presence of the European qualification framework serves to enhance recognition, there is not always complete consistency, making it harder to judge the parity of qualifications. The autonomous nature of higher education with regards to its curriculum design can also equally make this really complicated and make recognition even more challenging, because there is no set curriculum for higher education other than potentially those qualifications that are regulated. There isn't necessarily any standard curriculum, so it makes it harder to recognise and establish the parity between qualifications delivered within different institutions. There are, however, some opportunities here. So if we do start to recognise short learning programmes, it can make the higher education more accessible. It can promote it can potentially increase inclusivity, and potentially increase the idea of opportunities for education being open to all, enhancing this concept of lifelong learning. And it could therefore facilitate this kind of idea of developing more formal partnerships between different institutions. Throughout the completion of desktop research exploring approaches to recognition within partner institutions and countries, a significant theme emerged within the Work Package 5 work about the concept of validation as opposed to recognition of non-formal and informal learning, and the approaches used within the context of each country. So I felt, as being a researcher within Work Package 5, it was really, really important to kind of focus on this a little bit more, particularly when short learning programs have such a role within lifelong learning. So according to London, Back and Liz 2019, validation of prior learning is fundamental to the EU's approach to lifelong learning and is used by some universities in response to the economic and labour market needs, and for others as a way of widening access to higher education and also participation within higher education. According to the European Commission, it takes place for two purposes. We validate prior non-formal and informal learning to allow admission to a particular programme within a higher education institution, but also to allow learners to validate that they have either met, either partially or completely, the learning outcomes of HE programmes. According to the European Commission, higher education institutions should therefore be proactive in developing their policies for validating non-formal and informal learning and being able to award credit for learning that has been acquired outside of formal educational settings. So as part of the Work Package 5 within the European Short Learning Programmes project, we decided to do some more research on this. So I undertook some baseline research with 5 partner countries. I found the research, I researched validation processes within their countries, and then I sought validation of the accuracy of that information from the 5 relevant partner institutions within the project. I then gathered wider information from the remaining partners so that we could get a feel for the degree to which validation of non-formal and informal learning takes place within both the partner institutions and the countries within which they sit. Some of the key observations that we found was that it was quite clear that the value of non-formal and informal learning was understood by institutions and within the countries within which they sit. However, despite this, and irrespective of the presence of the guidelines on the validation of non-formal and informal learning, not all countries have a system to implement it. This raises some issues if consideration of prior learning is to be made within short learning programs, because I feel that it would be unjust if it was only formal certificated learning that was considered within short learning programs, given their role in developing lifelong opportunities, and particularly if a learner has completed a part of an SLP or a learning building block within an SLP through a different type of mode of learning. It would, however, be dependent on the institution's ability to recognise this learning within their individual learning building blocks, and the decision regarding this would therefore be delegated to the institution that owns the particular short learning programme and their underpinning policy on the recognition of prior learning. Throughout the kind of Work Package 5 research, we did identify 2 key problems, and I've tried to present a couple of solutions that we could use to overcome those problems. One of the fundamental problems that kind of we came across was the fact that there is no single European framework for the process of recognising credit. The presence of the qualification of the European qualification framework and the standards for guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area should, however, provide a reference point to facilitate some mutual recognition and enable the levelling of SLPs. The National Qualification Framework for all partner countries within the E-SLP project have been referenced to the European Qualifications Framework, and therefore a solution in the absence of a national framework for recognising credit is that the partner institutions enter into some reciprocal recognition arrangements for their short learning programmes. Another fundamental issue that kind of arose and that might exist is the concept of size and the size variance that might exist in short learning programmes across the European higher education area. It might be acceptable within a mutually arranged consortium framework to have variations within the size of SLPs, but if a fundamental aim is to facilitate the recognition of SLPs within qualification frameworks, as well as the European qualification frameworks, we might have problems arise if there is such a variation in the size of short learning programs. An SLP can be any size, but what can't happen is multiple versions of the same concept can't sit and be positioned within a framework. What we could have is, if we kept to a consistent size of a short learning programs, we could have multiple size learning building blocks or micro credentials which sit underneath a short learning program, as long as the kind of concept of short learning programs remains a consistent size. Okay, finally, kind of coming towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to make some recommendations for kind of recognising these short learning programs within the higher education area. So I'm going to kind of talk about these under two headings. Firstly, in terms of curriculum design, but then also looking at the recognition of prior learning within these short learning programs. So firstly, one of the outcomes of the Work Package 5 Work Package 5 within the project was the development of some principles of recognition. So when short learning programs are being developed and being designed, actually that there should be some key principles that are acknowledged within the design of that short learning program. So firstly, that they sit at EQF levels 5 to 8. They're no larger than 30 ECTS, and that the SLP itself documents the volume of workload in terms of both directed and self-study hours. The short learning program should consist of a coherent block of learning building blocks or micro-credentials, and that there should be very transparent learning outcomes. And I think it's that kind of principle of recognition that is really crucial here. Short learning programs should be written and aligned to the learning outcomes of the European qualification framework. But not only that, they should also be written in line with the cycle descriptions of the framework for qualifications in the European qualification area. And it is through this that we could potentially increase the transparency of these short learning programs for employers and individuals, and increase both the consistency of these qualifications as well as their currency within the labour market. In addition to this, the language intuition and assessment should be clearly stated, as well as the stackability of these short learning programs acknowledged. So we shouldn't be retrospectively fitting these short learning programs within larger degree programs. That should be agreed and acknowledged at the outside, at the very design of these short learning programs. And a real important principle here is that we should, if we want these SLPs to be recognised within the labour market, we need to include employers within their design. The last recommendation then that I'm going to make, and this is the last part of the presentation, is the recognition of prior learning within these short learning programs. So to widen access to higher level study and value the range of learning opportunities that are available within the society, we are recommending that all short learning programs should provide opportunities for recognition of prior learning, either non-formal, informal or formal learning that is at or above the level of the short learning program. has been completed at a recognised higher education institution, and I refer to that only being for formal learning only, because informal or non-formal learning, as we know, can take place in a variety of different kind of educational or non-educational settings. But also that it is assessed for relevance against the learning outcomes of the short learning programme or learning building block for whatever recognition is being kind of sought. The recognition of prior learning should therefore be considered at curriculum design stage. So it shouldn't be something that is done retrospectively when the SLP has been designed and it is up and running. It should be something that is done right at the start of when that short learning program is being designed. So there should be an acknowledgement and an agreement of how much prior learning that short learning program is willing to recognise. That is obviously going to be have to be in line with the recognition policies of the institution that owns the SLPs, but it should be decided on the outset. It should also be decided that the currency should also be decided if where applicable. So we know that currency of qualifications is potentially more applicable to formal qualifications rather than informal qualifications, and that informal learning that kind of develops spontaneously through work or life experiences. But there also should be, and this is a recommendation, that there is the inclusion of an assessment option only option for the different life learning building blocks within the SLPs or micro-credentials, so that a learner could potentially get recognition for a chunk of the short learning programme based on their previous learning that they have studied. This is now the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I have got a list of references, and I will pop my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions, please do come back to me. More than willing to and happy to help.
Thank you very much, Claire. It was a very interesting presentation as well. Do you have any questions for her regarding her presentation or regarding the SLP project or just short learning programs in general? Please, if you have any questions, write them in the chat so we can answer them. Everyone's saying thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Claire, for your presentation. Still see some people.
I'm just writing my email address now.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. And if you have questions later on or you're just thinking about it, and please send Claire an email as well. That can be. She just sent her email address in the chat. I still see some people typing. Not anymore. Oh, yes. Alessandra shared the link to the report Claire just presented. It's on the E-SLP website, and she just shared the link. A question from Clara is popping up. So, if SLPs and micro-credentials become more frequent, how would higher educations be able to scale up their RLP procedures?
I think it ultimately depends on what those initial procedures are that they have in place. In terms of, I mean, here at the Open University in the UK, we can recognise kind of chunks of learning. We can recognise chunks of learning that kind of fit a particular module size that we offer here at the Open University, and we can kind of stack learning together in order to give recognition against a particular part of a qualification. But I think ultimately it depends on where those RPL procedures are in the first place, and without looking at what an institution's RPL procedures are, it's kind of hard to see how they could grow.
Yes.
Is there another?
Yes, there's another question. Here in Spain, it's quite popular to limit prior education requisite to employment and also to entering in lifelong education programs, which is against their own constitution and also against the logic of the lifelong programs.
Yeah, and I think that goes to some degree against the EU Commission's kind of aim for us to be able to recognise different types of learning, whether it be non-formal or informal learning. It kind of, to me, kind of contradicts that concept.
All right. Thank you for your answer on those questions. Is there not any other question from the audience you would like Claire to give an answer to? I still see some people typing, so I think there must be some questions as well. Long questions today, but very interesting as well. Okay. Cannot see anyone typing anymore. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat or write them in an email to Claire if you want. Oh.
Should it be right or should be extensive to those who receive? I think that's a really good question. I think with formal, particularly here at the Open University, we do have kind of a currency in place, and we can actually accept learning that's up to 16 years old, particularly for formal certificated learning. But there is the kind of question as to whether it is appropriate for us to put a currency on non-formal or particularly informal learning. So how can we kind of say that somebody's informal learning, that learning that they've derived from work, from kind of just life experience that's naturally occurred? I think it's wrong for us to put a currency on that, as long as the individual can prove that their application of that learning is still current. So I think it depends on the type of learning that exists, that we are kind of trying to recognise.
Yes. Thank you for answering the questions. I think those were the questions for now. So I would like to thank you, Claire, and also Ingrid for your presentation today in the Short Learning Programs webinar week. I would also like to thank the audience for being here today, yesterday, and hopefully I will see you as well tomorrow. We'll turn on. So because tomorrow we will have the last day of a Short Learning Programs webinar week, please be noted that this day tomorrow will start 30 minutes later than today and yesterday. Tomorrow we will start at 2 p.m. European summertime, and we will finish at 3:30 tomorrow. And for the recordings, please visit our YouTube channel, and there you can find the recordings of yesterday, and hopefully in a few minutes also the recording of today. And I see also Alessandra is sharing the Eventbrite page, yes, for the whole program, which you can find in there. I would like to thank you all, especially thanks to our presenters and to the audience for being here. I'm really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. We have two other more presentations by Frederick, Eva, Magda, Päivi, Eisen, Virpi, and Gloria. And I wish you a lovely evening as well. Thank you very much. Bye.